Hello, this is John with Coach.Win. Each week, the coaches at Coach.Win get together and share best practices. We share articles we've written, articles we've read, and other sources of information that we think are valuable. We're going to be creating those into a podcast. Because we believe so much in AI, we're going to let the podcast be created by us uploading all those articles and have it automatically recorded. So while the voices you're about to hear are AI, the content behind it is all generated by the coaches at Coach.Win. Enjoy the podcast.
Okay, so picture this. You and your friends are about to head out on this classic cross-country road trip, California, here we come. But here's the thing. No one's actually thought about where they want to go or how to even get there. Yeah. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Asking for trouble.
Right, and it's like that old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. But in this case, any road is probably going to lead to arguments, wrong turns, and just a whole lot of frustration.
Exactly.
You know that feeling of being lost on the road to success?
Yeah.
Yeah, not fun, whether you're literally in a car or, let's be real, stuck at work.
Yeah.
But what if there was a way to get everyone on the same page? Headlights focused on that shared destination. That's where today's deep dive comes in. We're talking cascading scorecards. And we've got a ton of sources to unpack today. Business guides, articles, we're talking everything from leadership communication to gamifying your strategy. It's going to be quite the ride.
It is.
So before we hit the gas on this journey, let's make sure we're all starting from the same point. What exactly are these cascading scorecards?
Okay.
Well, let's go back to our road trip for a sec. Instead of that vague, let's go to California goal, think of cascading scorecards as setting those clear milestones. It's like saying, all right, Team Denver by this time next year. Then a swing through Vegas. Maybe hit some hidden gems along the way.
I like it. You're essentially making a roadmap, replacing that hazy California with specific destinations.
Yeah.
And what does that look like for success? Exactly. And just like on a road trip, everyone's got their role.
Right.
You got your navigator, your designated driver, the one who's always in charge of snacks.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Cascading scorecards do the same thing. But in a company, they take those big, often intimidating company goals.
Oh, yeah.
And break them down into smaller, more trackable goals for each department and for each person.
So instead of that vague, let's increase sales goal, which, let's be honest, can feel about as inspiring as watching paint dry.
Right.
You're talking about those specific, actionable steps that actually move the needle.
You got it. It's about identifying those daily actions.
Yeah.
The ones that are strong predictors of future success. We call them leading indicators. And trust me, the impact is huge.
Give me an example.
Okay, so one study found that teams that were tracking their daily customer interactions, they saw like a 20% increase in sales compared to those who were just fixated on their monthly revenue report. It's about being proactive, not reactive.
So to unpack that for our listeners, let's say you're in sales. Your scorecard might have number of customer interactions as a key metric, right? It's something you can control every single day. And those small wins, they all add up to that bigger picture.
Precisely. It's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant?
I know this one.
One bite at a time.
And that's what I really like about this cascading idea. It's like you've got this big goal at the top, and it breaks down into these smaller streams that everyone can contribute to, But before we go too far, I want to talk about how these scorecards actually change things, because let's be real, we've all been there, right? Things at work go sideways, and suddenly it's a blame game.
Oh, tell me about it.
Fingers are pointing. Tensions are high. Not exactly what you'd call a productive environment.
For sure.
It's like that awkward family dinner where you're just waiting for someone to bring up politics.
Oh, God, yeah.
And speaking of awkward encounters, one of the sources we found for this deep dive was this business fable. And I know what you're thinking. A business fable sounds a bit cheesy.
A little bit.
But trust me on this one. It captures that whole blame game dynamic perfectly.
Okay.
So in this fable, you've got this leadership team. They're dealing with a client crisis. And instead of, working together to find a solution, they fall into those almost instinctive reactions, right? Defend, deflect, attack.
It's classic.
I've been in that room. I don't even know how many times. It's like everyone just forgets how to actually talk to each other.
It's true, though. It's like everyone reverts back to...
But here's what's so interesting. Just naming those patterns, defend, deflect, attack, it's like you suddenly realize, oh, this is the dysfunctional game everyone's playing. And more importantly, you can choose to play by a different set of rules.
Right. You're not stuck.
Exactly. Which brings us back to cascading scorecards. So remember that road trip analogy. Instead of yelling at the driver for making a wrong turn,
Happens to the best of us.
which, let's be honest, just makes things worse. Imagine a calmer approach. Hey, looks like we missed a turn back there. Let's check the map and figure out the best way to get back on track.
Much better.
With cascading scorecards, you're replacing blame. With a collaborative problem-solving session.
I like that because everyone's got their scorecard, their own area they're responsible for.
Right.
So it's not about pointing fingers. It's less, whose fault is this? And more, okay, this thing's a little off track. How do we help each other out? What can we each do to get back on course?
Yeah.
It's like that weekly game film session athletes have. They analyze the wins and losses, but in this case, it's about continuous improvement, not just harping on past mistakes.
And speaking of game film, this brings us to what I think our listeners are going to be really into, the whole gamification thing. Remember getting those gold stars in school?
Oh, yeah.
Turns out a little positive reinforcement goes a long way. Even in the workplace. It really is funny how motivating a little recognition can be. Like, we all crave those little wins, those, hey, you're doing a good job moments.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, it's like our brains are hardwired to respond to that kind of feedback loop.
Right.
It's like leveling up in a video game.
Exactly.
It just feels good.
So instead of hiding those metrics away in some spreadsheet, imagine this big visible scoreboards around the office,
I like it.
company-wide, departmental,
Okay.
even individual ones.
So we're talking like marketing team crushing it this week.
Exactly. Or like sales needs a caffeine boost, It makes progress or lack thereof impossible to ignore.
And a little healthy competition never hurt anyone.
Right. Exactly. Okay, but, and maybe this is a silly question, we got to make sure we're putting the right stuff up on those scoreboards.
Right.
Like, it can't just be random numbers.
Oh, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
You don't want to overload anyone with too much information.
Data overload is real.
The key is to choose a few highly visible real-time metrics, the ones that everyone understands.
So it's got to be a mix of those leading indicators we were talking about,
Right,
those
so-
daily actions that really drive those results.
Yep.
But also the big picture stuff too, right?
You got it.
Like, I'm picturing sales calls made this week alongside overall revenue for the month.
Now you're thinking like a CEO. It's about having that speedometer, an EA, a GPS.
Yeah.
You need to know how fast you're going. But also, are you even on the right road? And you know what this makes me think of? Performance reviews.
Oh, here we go.
If you're looking at these scorecards all the time, having these regular check-ins, do we even need those dreaded annual reviews anymore?
You know what? That's a really good question. That's a question that more and more companies are asking themselves these days. Imagine this. Instead of that once-a-year nerve-wracking performance review where your manager has somehow remembered every single thing you did wrong that entire year,
Every little slip up.
you have these short, supportive check-ins based on your scorecard.
I like it.
Maybe even grab a coffee while you're at it.
Right. Make it a whole thing.
Now that's a performance review I can get behind. Less pressure, more support. It's like having a coach in your corner, not a principal ready to give you detention. And that's a really important point here. Cascading scorecards, they're not just about the data and the metrics.
It's bigger than that.
It's about creating a culture of clarity, accountability, and most importantly, support. When you get this right, everyone feels empowered to do their best work.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's not about micromanaging. It's about having that shared roadmap so everyone feels ownership in what they're doing.
Right. When people actually know where they stand and what's expected of them, it reduces anxiety and it boosts morale. No more guessing games. No more scrambling to figure out what your boss actually wants. And speaking of winning together, this brings us back to our original question. What does it actually mean to win in the workplace? Is it just about hitting those targets, or is there something more to it?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And I think cascading scorecards can actually help us answer that because you're tracking both individual and collective progress.
Right.
It's about celebrating those small victories along the way, recognizing those daily wins that ultimately lead to those big, hairy, audacious goals, the kind of goals that feel impossible until suddenly they're not.
It's the best feeling.
It's that feeling of, wow, we actually did that. And it's not just about the destination, it's about enjoying the journey too. Those little moments of triumph along the way.
Totally, because work is always going to be work.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this constant uphill battle.
Well said. It's about finding fulfillment in the process, knowing you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And that's what I like about this deep dive. We're giving our listeners real tools and strategies, not just some vague ideas.
Exactly. We're giving them the power to make a real change.
And that's what it's all about. So for our listeners, here's something to think about until next time. What if your workplace felt more like a winning team? How much more engaged? How much more productive? Heck, how much happier would you be? Think about it. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic that matters. Until then, happy collaborating.